artists and art lovers, welcome to Season 2, Episode 9 of Princeton Makes podcast, where every month we meet an artist and dive into their creative life. I'm Zohar Lavi-Hasson, and my guest today is Renata Pugh. Hi Renata.
Hello Zohar.
And Renata is the artist of the month this month, and she has her work at the window, and also she has an artist talk. So if you still don't know what Princeton Makes is, I'm going to ask Renata to explain it to us today.
Well, Princeton Makes is an artist co-op that formed over the summer of 2022. We're about roughly 40 artists now. We have a retail space and a store in the front where we sell our stuff, and then artist studios in the back. I have an artist studio. We also have studios downstairs in the basement. We have offer workshops, live music once a month, poetry readings, all kinds of cool events, but it's also just a place to hang out and talk with friends. And
how did you get here?
I found out through Adriana.
Adriana is one of our artists here.
Yes, Adriana is one of our artists, and we did like a West Windsor Arts Council holiday art show. We didn't know each other at the time, but I guess she took my information, and then she contacted me out of the blue, like 2 years later, and said, "Hey, there's an artist.
2 years later, oh, cool.
Yeah, there's a co-op forming. Would you be interested in joining?" And I was like, "Yeah." So I've been here pretty much since the beginning.
Cool. And what kind of art do you make?
I'm kind of all over the map, but generally now I just do, I work in stained glass. I make jewelry and votive candle holders, but I'd like to get back into drawing and like pen and ink more, which is really my foundation.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And you have these beautiful lamps from stained glass?
Yeah, that's what I started making lamps actually first, when I first learned stained glass, like it was like probably 15 years ago. But then I got smaller and smaller.
So what's your number one selling item?
I would say the jewelry.
The jewelry.
That's a regular seller, yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people like to buy jewelry.
Yeah.
So how did you start with art? Where did you even grow up?
I grew up in South Brunswick, not too far from here.
Yeah.
I had a lot of creative interests and abilities, but I started drawing around 2.5. That's what my mom tells me. I don't even remember. It became an obsession, and I just drew a lot of facial expressions and just people in general. And then I started illustrating scenes from movies that I love, like Little Mermaid or Who Framed Roger Rabbit, TV shows, and then Greek mythology that I was, studying, and come up with my own stories using those characters.
So you liked storytelling too?
Yes, and actually when I graduated high school, I chose illustration as my major at School of Visual Arts when I was accepted there. So I have a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Illustration.
Do you still try to draw stories?
Well, actually, I never really pursued it. I did have some gigs as a storyboard artist, which I really liked because I liked drawing people from different angles and different scenes.
Yeah.
And I could draw quickly. I also was a muralist briefly.
Yeah.
But yeah, I never really got into it. I got into art restoration instead. Like a couple years later, someone told me about this job in the city. So that's really what I did predominantly.
Where?
It was in Manhattan. It was like this, they're still around. It's a family-owned business. It's an art conservator and his family, and they work together. They basically have stuff that comes in from private collectors or dealers, and also auction houses, mainly sculpture.
Oh, sculpture.
Yeah.
So what kind of work did you do on those?
I did...
Because people don't know what it really means to do that kind of work.
Yeah, you hear more about like painting conservation, but he didn't really work on painting so much, or paper. We did, worked on marble, so I did a lot of cleaning. I did like sanding and refinishing of marble, like basically to make it smoother, because outside in the elements, marble would get rough over time. And also like if there were toes and fingers missing, I would help to recarve the toes, like recreate them. And
from marble?
Yeah.
So you know how to work with marble?
Yeah, and I did waxing of bronzes, because the wax would come off over time, and a lot of paint touch-up.
Did you like that job?
Yeah, I did. And I mean, I learned a lot about all kinds of different materials, and that's really what got me into making my own 3D work.
So how did you move on to that?
My friend and colleague who I worked with, he started making armatures for me that were set in wood bases, and I would put plastilina on the armature and make sculptures. And then he also showed me the craft of stained glass, so I really got into that. And then I also took metalworking classes at the Art Students League.
Okay.
And got into plasma cutting. That's where you're basically like cutting holes in sheet metal.
Wow.
And welding, bending metal and welding. And
so you do work in a lot of mediums.
yeah. Oh, and I love printmaking too. That was in college that I learned that.
Oh, I love printmaking.
Yeah.
How was the experience at the Art Student League?
It was great. I found a whole bunch of new friends there,
Yeah.
artist friends, and we would ask for advice and talk about our projects with each other and share. It was like the first artist community I was part of before I was here.
Yeah.
And I had been making these metal sculptures out of steel, and then I was nominated for a grant program that they had, working with the New York City Parks and Recreation to come up with a theme. There were 7 people who were chosen for this program.
Yeah.
For 1 year, and then they would come up with a unifying theme, and then each artist would come up with their own sculpture to somehow represent that theme. So we came up with flow,
Yeah.
and we had to come up with create these small scale models. We had to present them to the New York City Parks
Yeah.
people. We had to come up with some sort of artist statement, and then just figure out like how much it was going to cost, if it was going to fit into the budget that they gave us. Then we had to get the budget approved. And then we set to work on actually building these large public sculptures.
Wow.
Which-
How large?
Mine was 10 feet tall
Wow.
by about 15 feet long.
What was it made out of?
Aluminum, riveted
was
aluminum.
it like abstract?
Yeah, it was abstract, but it was also a head.
A head.
So it was like an abstracted head. So you wouldn't even know, like, if you were behind it necessarily, that it was this giant human head, and then you walk around and you're like, oh, there's
What
a nose.
year was this?
This was 2012. It was complete. We only had 9 months,
Wow.
which is insane.
Wow.
Everybody was really stressed out. They've since expanded time.
And it was in the city?
Yes, it was in New York. It was in Riverside Park South.
Wow, so cool.
Yeah, so all our sculptures were there for a year.
Link to the photo on the show notes.
Yeah,
Yes.
check it
Very
out.
Cool, yeah. Do you miss doing stuff like that?
I kind of do. I mean, it was the biggest challenge I ever had.
Yeah.
Actually, the opening ceremony, the day we had the opening ceremony, was and probably still is like the happiest day of my life. And I think half of that was because of all the stress
Yeah.
that suddenly just got to end.
Yeah. Amazing. And you had a sculpture here from metal that was sold recently.
Yeah.
When did you make that one?
I made that around the same time. I
Yeah.
think it was 2011, 2012,
But it's hard to make this when you don't have like the facility.
Yeah, you have to be set up with like a welding machine and plasma cutter,
Oh, God.
which is,
We'll buy one.
yeah,
It's in the budget.
that would be awesome.
After a kiln.
Yeah, that's right.
You really do a lot of different kind of arts. How do you decide what to do that day? What kind of craft or art to make, and also what's the content going to be?
It's tough. I mean, I usually just get some kind of vague feeling, like I'm feeling like drawing today, or I feel like, I have enough energy to make a stained glass votive holder or something. I mean, the processes are so different. If it's something like, oh, I want to work on a drawing, some kind of 2D piece, then I have these ideas. I also do photography. And
Of course.
Of course, yeah, because why not just throw that in there?
So just like your wake up and today I'm going to make...
Yeah. I mean, it's usually like I just look at the table and if that I have here, and if it looks like there needs to be more jewelry, then that basically makes up my mind for me.
Yeah. How do you decide on the content that day?
I just look at like what colors could be added to the table. So if it looks like I'm missing orange earrings or yellow ones, then I'll try to find some glass in that, and then I'll make those earrings. It's really it makes it simpler. You know, when you have your stuff in a store and you
Right.
kind of know that it sells regularly, that's kind of just, it makes up your mind for you.
Yeah, good.
So,
And when you want to draw, where do you get your inspiration for that?
photographs that I've taken in the past that I had plans to turn into something like a collage or a drawing. I like taking like found imagery and then basically taking that photograph, putting it down on a piece of paper and then extending the lines at the edges and kind of turning them into something else that's abstract and kind of hiding the original photograph on the page.
But it stays there?
It stays there, yeah.
And we'll put in the show notes, we'll put a link to one of those so people understand
Oh yeah,
what
that's a
you're
good
talking
idea,
about.
yeah. It's hard to describe on a podcast, so.
So what's the project that you're interested in doing right now?
I would like to do more work based on my photography, where I either copy photographs I've taken of bridges
Yeah.
and close-ups of industrial kind of wrought iron that I've seen in the city. Cut them out, like print them out as like black and white photos, different scales,
Yeah.
and then place them on a larger piece of paper. I guess like glue them down, or just randomly arrange them, and then connect the lines that are in the photographs of those objects, and like just draw them, extend them onto the paper underneath, and kind of connect the photographs together with the lines.
The different sizes and the different...
Yeah.
Oh, that sounds cool.
And just fill up the background, just fill up the space with this sort of like
that
abstract.
would be drawing?
Yeah, it would predominantly be drawing, but I guess I'd like to introduce some color, maybe, just very subtle.
Yeah.
Very subtle color, and maybe some white chalk pastel to create highlights.
So when you decide to make a project like this, how long is it going to take you to do you think?
Well,
Typically.
so the one that I'm thinking of that's in my studio now, I started that.
What is it?
It's exactly that, just the photograph of the bridges.
Yeah.
It was actually the Williamsburg Bridge at different angles from underneath. And I guess like maybe 12 years ago, I put down the pieces of the copies that I had made of this photograph randomly, but then I didn't really do anything after that.
Yeah.
And then I like rediscovered it last year.
Wow.
And I finished it. So I don't know how
So
long.
maybe 12 years.
Maybe 12 years. Yeah.
So you have a lot of these kind of like things that you start, you put aside,
Yeah.
you think about it, or
Yeah,
you don't
there's
think
a lot
about
of
it.
that, yeah.
Yeah.
And then things that I'm just like, no, I don't like this at all.
You throw things to the trash.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've recycled a fair amount of my work, yeah.
Drawing like this, are you trying to sell it or?
I'm not really thinking about selling it. This isn't my day job, selling my artwork, so I like the freedom that provides, where I can just kind of do it for art's sake, or I like it for myself because it's like solving a puzzle,
Okay, so you enjoy it.
Yeah.
But you do sell your jewelry.
I do, yeah.
What's your day job?
My day job right now is I work as an analyst trainee for the Department of Environmental Protection, New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection.
So you have a full-time job.
Yeah.
Then you're here on the weekends?
Yeah, Saturdays usually.
So that's interesting. You try to solve a puzzle which you create for yourself. The puzzle. It's not like you're going to do a Sudoku or something.
Right. Yeah.
So can you give more examples of puzzles like that you make for yourself and then enjoy solving?
Often with like switching back to stained glass, for instance, if I have an idea in mind, a certain design, and then the piece of glass that I'm scoring doesn't break the right way, doesn't break the way I want it to, either I'll try to score it again and hopefully it breaks the right way, or I'll just work with that first piece and just think like, okay, how can I make this work in the design? How can I fill up that space between that piece and another piece of glass that I create?
I think it's a little confusing because most of our listeners don't know how to do stained glass and what's the process and what are you talking about. Yeah. So maybe explain a little bit how it works.
Well, basically, so I'll just stick with the lamp since that's the most process oriented, like step by step. I have an idea for how I want my stained glass lamp to look. They're not Tiffany style lamps. I know most people are familiar with that. This is very like non-traditional.
Yeah. And we'll also put a link to
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
And so then I just have these sketches, and then it's time to basically turn that sketch into templates. So there's, let's say, 4 sides of the lamp,
Yeah.
and then I will create templates to scale. So I figure out how wide it's going to be. Let's say it's like, 8 inches wide
Yeah.
by 10 inches tall or something. I'll just draw it out with a ruler, and then I kind of figure out what shapes within that
Which is like a puzzle.
dimension. Yeah, and then I choose 3 colors, and then I like to also choose 3 different types of textures of glass too.
And the glass is ready-made?
Yeah.
How do you have it?
I just buy it
You can buy
from different sources, yeah.
Okay. You make first basically like a model from paper, that's what you mean?
Yeah.
And you cut it the shapes that you want and see how it's going to work. And then you go to the glass.
I usually take a photograph before I cut up the shapes in the template so I don't get confused. Like, oh, did this piece go here or there? Because that also happens.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a puzzle I don't intend on making for myself, but that's happened many times.
Yeah.
I'll take a piece of glass and then I score it with the glass cutter. That just means to kind of start breaking the glass.
Yeah.
And then you lift it up and you tap it,
Oh.
and so it breaks. And then that's the part where you just hope that, it breaks the right way. Yeah.
And then sometimes it doesn't.
So then what I do is I put them through the glass grinder just to kind of smooth the edges more. I take copper foil tape and I just tape the edges, sort of right on the edge itself and then the sides of the piece. And then you kind of burnish it. You really make sure that copper foil tape is really on there. Then you take a flux, what they call a solder flux, and that's basically just to clean the metal. And then you put solder itself. I use lead-free solder. You have a hot iron.
Yeah.
Then you melt the solder onto the edges of the glass.
And you connect them with that?
Yes, and you also bond them that way.
Sounds like a very complicated
It's
process.
intensive, yeah. And I also like to use solder decoratively. That also adds a lot of time in.
So sometimes you just break the glass and it doesn't break right. So what would you do then?
I'll either try it again with a new piece, or I'll just work with what I have, and I'll just say, okay, how can I kind of reconfigure the design so that it'll still look good? It won't look like a broken piece of glass that's stuck in this in this piece. I usually just end up taking like another smaller piece of glass, and fitting it in there, or glass gems. With the lamps, I use sliced agates.
So this is like a puzzle.
Solder.
This is like a literal puzzle.
Yeah.
That gives you creative enjoyment.
Yeah, it's weird because it's very frustrating, but it's also very rewarding at the same time. It's a lot of labor, but I'm always pleased with the results these days.
Good. I talked with people in the past year, and we talked about, does your art gives you pleasure, pain, torture? So how is it with you?
I would say it's given me all those things.
Yeah.
Overall, I would say it's kind of reminds me of just life in general. Like, something doesn't go the way you want it to, so then you have to basically work with what you have.
Yeah.
That's a big part of it. Yeah, just kind of figuring out the puzzle, figuring out how to make something harmonious, So that can be tough in the beginning, and sometimes you have to, there's a few tries, you have to start all over again. But in the end, it's a good thing, It's not a waste of time.
Yeah. So you are very creative in so many different kind of art, but we didn't mention that you also make music. So can you talk about that?
Yeah, well, I started playing guitar when I was 12. I also used to sing a lot. I don't really do that as much these days, but yeah, I love all kinds of music. I predominantly play, whenever I have time, electric guitar.
Yeah.
And
at home?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just come up with like different riffs and different scales, and
you make your own, write your own music?
Yeah. But they're never like, I've never made a song. I've never really performed my own work. I'm not really a performer. I could probably jam with other people, but.
Can you say the highlight of your career is writing the music to our podcast?
Oh yes, definitely.
Yeah, because this is the music that Renata wrote. Renata, it is time to move on to our speed questions, in which you are going to answer very quick answers to my quick questions. What is your favorite artist of all times?
I'm going to go with Ralph Steadman.
I have never heard of it, but we'll put it in the show notes.
Okay.
What is your favorite material to create in?
Ink, mainly all types of ink, but printing ink is my favorite.
What is the space that you feel the most creative in?
Probably like a high-ceilinged loft printmaking studio.
Oh, there's one specific one, or just a dream?
Just a dream one.
Okay.
Yeah.
What music or podcast or soundtrack you like to listen to when you create?
When I'm in the beginning part of designing my work, when I kind of have to hear myself think, then I want something that doesn't have vocals. So like electro, pop, progressive rock, instrumental music.
What is your worst artistic nightmare?
I guess with stained glass, it's like if the glass just keeps breaking the wrong way or it cracks as soon as you finish it. That's annoying.
Yeah. That's the worst artistic nightmare.
Well, it's probably worse,
Yeah.
but
Okay.
I have to think about it.
Yeah. Percentage of art making versus admin, if it's relevant to you?
Right now, it's like probably 90% art making and 10% admin.
Nice. In one word, please describe how do you feel when you create art?
Intrigued.
All right, so thank you so much, Renata.
Thank
It
you,
was a
Zohar.
pleasure. How can people find you?
My Instagram handle is Renata672. I also have another one just for my glass work, which I call Ars Lumina. It's ARS Lumina. And then you can find both of those on Facebook. And then I have a general website that's like Renata Pugh Adobe Portfolio.
And we'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah.
We are Princeton Makes Podcast. Our designer is RD, and our theme music is written and performed by Renata Pugh. Yay! I'm Zohar Lavi-Hasson, producing and hosting. If you have any questions or comments, please email us to our email address, princetonmakespodcast@gmail.com. Also, let us know if you would like to be added to our mailing list. We have a newsletter which will tell you all the events that we have here. Please rate and share this podcast so it can reach others and maybe inspire them to create. Princeton Makes is located at Princeton Shopping Center. At Princeton, we are open Thursday to Sundays, 10 to 6. Until next time, be creative and kind.